All right, today we're going to look at keeping our vows. While we continue working our way through 2 Samuel, we're going to look at chapter 9 today. So we're going to start off with the question, what kind of vows or promises would we be most familiar with? Right? Towards the top of probably everybody's list is going to be something like a marriage vow or something like that. Today, we're going to look at a couple of vows in Scripture, not a lot, a couple, and see what they might have to do with this chapter. So we're just going to read chapter 9 straight through to begin. It's a very short chapter, so we're going to get it in our head, and then we're going to go back and look at a couple things here. So starting in verse 1 of chapter 9 of 2 Samuel, it reads, "And David said, 'Is there still anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake?' Now there was a servant of the house of Saul whose name was Ziba, and they called him to David. And the king said to him, 'Are you Ziba?' And he said, 'I am your servant.' And the king said, 'Is there not still someone of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God to him?' Ziba said to the king, 'There is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet.' The king said to him, 'Where is he?' And Ziba said to the king, 'He is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel at Lodebar.' Then King David sent and brought him from the house of Machir, the son of Amiel at Lodebar. And Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. And David said, 'Mephibosheth.' And he answered, 'Behold, I am your servant.' And David said to him, 'Do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table always.' And he paid homage and said, 'What is your servant, that you should show regard for a dead dog such as I?' Then the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said to him, 'All that belonged to Saul and to all his house I have given to your master's grandson. And you and your sons and your servants shall till the land for him and shall bring in the produce, that your master's grandson may have bread to eat, but Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, shall always eat at my table.' Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, 'According to all that my lord the king commands his servant, so will your servant do.' So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah. And all who lived in Ziba's house became Mephibosheth's servants. So Mephibosheth lived in Jerusalem, for he ate always at the king's table. Now he was lame in both feet." It's an interesting way to end that chapter there. It's a reminder that if we remember back when the battle that killed Saul and Jonathan, when I believe it was the maidservant of his house, found out, she picked him up. He was a young child. I think he was about 5 years old. And she picked him up and took off running and dropped him. And after that, he was crippled in both feet. So we don't know if we're not really sure what the cause or what the result actually was, just that he was lame in his feet. So why, when David is at the height of his rulership, why would he want to do something for the house of Saul? Now, verse 1 told us it was for Jonathan's sake, but Jonathan and Saul, they've been dead for quite some time now. So if we look at these other two verses, they'll shed some light on it for us. So the first one we'll look at is 1 Samuel chapter 20, verse 15. And that reads, this is Jonathan speaking to David, "And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever, when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth." Well, if we were reading chapter 8, that's kind of in progress right now. Every enemy that's coming against David is being defeated. He's being secured on all sides. So this is an oath that he made to Jonathan for posterity. He also, in 1 Samuel chapter 24, verses 21 and 22, made a similar oath to Saul. And that's Saul talking now to David, says, "Swear to me therefore by the Lord that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house. And David swore this to Saul. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. So David has a new house of cedar. He has a new covenant with God, the Davidic covenant that just happened. He's defeated all of his surrounding enemies, but these promises, they're still out there in the wind. And David keeps his word. So he didn't kill Mephibosheth, which would have been the normal pattern of events as part of his family being the prior king and him being a possible rival to the throne. Instead, David makes sure that Mephibosheth would be taken care of. And it even says that he's going to eat at King David's table always. So that's how David kept his word. Do we keep our vows that same way? Right? There's nobody that could have been a witness against David, that he even made these vows, but he knew, and so did God. And in our lives, we might think we don't need to keep our promises if nobody will find out, but we know, and so does the Lord. I've heard people say that I said I would do this thing, but I didn't promise I would do it. And they would use that as a reason to not carry through with what they had said. But the Lord has something to say about that as well. If we look at Matthew chapter 5, verses 33 to 37, Jesus, talking about oaths, says, "Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, 'You shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn.' But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil." So we need to keep these things in mind when we make a promise, or when we give somebody our word, or when we say we're going to do something, right? And by keeping our word and keeping our promises, that's one way that we can let our light shine. Now, if we stay in Matthew chapter 5 and just move up a few verses, let's go up to verse 13 here. Jesus talking, this is that same sermon prior to when he was talking about oaths. He's talking about salt and light. So verse 13, starting, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored?" Right? You can't make salt salty again. "It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." So you see, when we make these vows and promises and covenants, and even a simple yes or a no, these are us giving our word. These are, if we break that, that is a damage to our testimony. So we need to stay in good light and be a light, a reflection of the Lord's light, and let that shine out so others can see it. And like Jesus says, give glory to your Father who's in heaven. So I hope somebody's blessed by this today.